the unknown creature. In Prometheus, biologist Milburn and geologist Fifield become separated from the rest of the crew and end up trapped inside a gigantic alien structure. While searching for a way out, they come across a strange creature that was created after tiny worms came into contact with the mysterious black liquid spread throughout the temple. While Fifield chooses to keep his distance, Milburn decides to approach the creature. Convinced that it poses no threat, he becomes fascinated by the organism, calls it beautiful, and tries to touch it as if he were dealing with a harmless animal. That decision ultimately proves to be a fatal mistake. The creature responds immediately. Known as the Hammerpede, it suddenly shifts into an attack posture and tightly coils itself around his arm.
You're strong.
When Fifield tries to help, he only makes things worse. And both of them end up paying the price for getting too close to that unknown organism. With Milburn helpless and screaming in agony, the Hammerpede unwraps itself from his arm, crawls across his chest, and forces its way inside his helmet, slithering into his mouth and suffocating him to death. Fifield, however, doesn't die. The creature's acid melts through his helmet, causing him to fall face first into the black liquid. Hours later, what comes out isn't the geologist anymore, but a mutated creature that returns to the ship and massacres half the crew. This scene became one of the most criticized decisions in Prometheus. To this day, many fans still find it hard to believe that a scientist trained for a space mission would make such an unbelievably stupid decision. The college students. In Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, the premise is absolutely brilliant. Tucker and Dale are two incredibly kind-hearted hillbillies who just want to renovate their cabin deep in the woods.
Oh, look out!
The problem is that a group of college students completely misinterprets everything they see and becomes convinced the two are serial killers. From that point on, every attempt to save the day ends in the worst way imaginable. One of the funniest deaths belongs to Mitch. After Allison falls into the lake and Dale rescues her, her friends become convinced she's been kidnapped. In reality, she's simply resting inside the cabin after hitting her head, and Dale is taking care of her. The following morning, the students discover the cabin. Mitch decides to approach it alone to rescue Allison. At the same time, Tucker is outside trying to cut down a beehive with a chainsaw, but he accidentally enrages the bees. Completely covered by a swarm, Tucker comes running through the woods with the chainsaw in his hands, screaming and wildly flailing his arms to scare the bees away. From Mitch's point of view, it looks like a crazed killer is charging straight at him. Panicking, Mitch runs blindly through the forest without watching where he's going and gets impaled by a tree branch through his abdomen. And that's only one of the movie's ridiculously stupid deaths. There are plenty more, and that's exactly what makes it so funny. The harder the college students try to act like they're the heroes of a slasher movie, the more disastrous everything becomes. In another scene, Todd charges straight at Dale while holding his own homemade spear, trips over himself, and impales himself with his own weapon. Mike somehow manages to throw himself directly into a wood chipper. And that's how Tucker and Dale vs. Evil turns completely unbelievable accidents into one of the greatest horror comedies ever made. The final video. In Bodies, 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 a group of wealthy young adults becomes trapped inside a mansion during a hurricane. To pass the time, they decide to play a murder mystery party game. The problem is, someone actually turns up dead. Panic immediately spreads through the house. From that moment on, everyone becomes convinced there's a real killer hiding among them. After an entire night filled with accusations, arguments, and deaths caused by the group's own paranoia, only Bee and Sophie remain alive. Everyone else is dead. Both of them become convinced the other is responsible for everything, and they end up fighting for their lives. That's when Bee grabs David's phone, the first person found dead in the movie. She's hoping to find some hidden clue revealing who committed the murders. Instead, she finds a video David recorded just moments before his death. And well, the video reveals that David was completely alone, trying to open a champagne bottle with a machete so he could film a funny video. In the middle of it, he completely misses the swing and accidentally kills himself. That's it. There was never a murderer. Every act of violence that happened that night was the result of everyone panicking and turning against each other.
What happened?
The Boxer vs. Jason. In Friday the 13th Part 8, our old friend Jason Voorhees finally makes it to New York. Even though the title makes it sound like the city will be the movie's main setting, most of the story actually takes place before Jason ever gets there. Still, once he finally sets foot in Manhattan, he delivers one of the most iconic scenes in the entire franchise. Julius Gaw is both a college student and a boxer. After becoming separated from the other survivors, he finds himself cornered by Jason on top of a rooftop. With nowhere left to run, and knowing escape isn't an option, he decides to face the killer the only way he knows how, by boxing. Let's be honest, the guy was brave, stupid, but brave. Julius unleashes an endless barrage of punches. He lands blow after blow to Jason's face, his chest, his head. For a few seconds, it actually looks like his plan might work. The problem is, Jason doesn't react at all. He simply stands there absorbing every punch as though nothing is happening. After throwing so many punches, Julius is completely exhausted. Out of breath, he lowers his guard, stares Jason in the eyes, and says,
Take your best shot. Motherfucker.
"You really shouldn't have said that." Jason answers with a single punch, ending the fight instantly. It's impossible not to laugh at how over the top the scene is. Actor Vincent Craig Dupree later revealed that he threw so many punches during filming that he was genuinely exhausted by the end of the take, which made his character's desperation look much more convincing. The vending machine. In Maximum Overdrive, every electrical machine suddenly turns against humanity. One of the movie's most memorable scenes takes place during a children's baseball game. The team's coach walks over to a soda vending machine to buy himself a drink, but the machine eats his coins without giving him anything back. Annoyed, he starts hitting the machine and bends down to check the soda slot. It turns out to be the worst possible decision. The machine suddenly comes to life and begins firing soda cans at incredible speed, like bullets. The coach is the first one to get hit, and he drops immediately. Then the cans start flying toward the children on the field, sending everyone into absolute panic. This death makes the list because it's almost impossible to imagine arguing with a soda machine ending like this. The Garage. In Scream, Tatum Riley is one of the movie's most lovable characters. During a party at Stu's house, she heads into the garage to grab more beer, and that's exactly where Ghostface decides to attack. When the killer first appears, Tatum doesn't even take him seriously. She assumes it's just one of her friends trying to scare her, and even jokes about it, but the game ends the moment Ghostface injures her. And she realizes the danger is real. Even then, Tatum doesn't panic right away. She fights back, she throws bottles, hits Ghostface multiple times, and even manages to knock him down for a few seconds. She's one of the victims who gives Ghostface the hardest time. But when it's finally time to escape, she makes one of the most infamous decisions in horror movie history. Instead of looking for another exit, she tries to squeeze through the tiny cat door. She can't fit and ends up getting stuck. From that point on, Ghostface's job becomes incredibly easy. He simply presses the garage door button, the door starts rising, and her desperate escape attempt becomes a deadly trap. A fun behind-the-scenes fact is that actress Rose McGowan was actually thin enough to fit through the opening in real life. During filming, the crew had to pin her clothes in place so she'd get stuck, and the scene would work as intended. The Corn. In Sleepwalkers, the story follows Charles and Mary Brady, a mother and son who appear to be an ordinary family, but are actually shape-shifting creatures with vampiric traits. To survive, they must feed on the life force of young virgins. In the film's climax, Mary breaks into Tanya's house to kidnap her and save Charles, who is on the verge of dying. It is during this invasion that one of the most unbelievable deaths in the entire movie takes place. A police officer inside the house tries to call for help, but Mary suddenly appears. Instead of using her claws, or any genuinely dangerous weapon, she grabs the very first thing she finds on the counter, a simple ear of cooked corn. Yes, an ear of corn. Thanks to her superhuman strength, that piece of corn basically becomes a spear. With a single strike, she kills the police officer. And as if that weren't already ridiculous enough, Mary immediately follows it up with a terrible pun.
No vegetables, no dessert. Those are the rules.
Looking incredibly proud of herself, as though she'd just delivered the greatest one-liner in movie history. The barrier. In The Cabin in the Woods, 5 friends travel to a remote cabin, believing they're about to enjoy an ordinary weekend. What they don't know is that everything is part of a massive experiment designed to manipulate their every move and recreate the classic cliches of horror movies. After realizing they're trapped, Kurt, the group's athlete played by Chris Hemsworth, decides to step into the role of the hero. He delivers an inspiring speech, announces that he's going to jump the enormous canyon on his motorcycle to get help. It's exactly the kind of moment that in any other movie would end with the protagonist barely making it to safety. The direction even convinces the audience that's what's about to happen. The camera follows the motorcycle from epic angles as Kurt accelerates at full speed, using a natural ramp to launch himself across the massive chasm. But halfway through the jump, instead of reaching the other side, Kurt slams directly into an invisible force field surrounding the entire area. The impact is instantaneous. The entire scene lasts little more than 10 seconds, yet it became one of the movie's most unforgettable moments. The tennis racket. In Freaky, the real story only begins after a serial killer known as the Blissfield Butcher swaps bodies with the protagonist. But before that ever happens, the movie delivers an opening that immediately establishes its tone, a slasher packed with dark comedy, creative kills, and outrageous moments that fully embrace the absurd. It all begins inside a mansion, where 4 wealthy teenagers spend the night talking about the legend of the town's mysterious killer. And just like in practically every great horror movie, they barely finish talking about the villain before he shows up and turns their gathering into a nightmare. After killing 2 of the teenagers, the butcher goes after the couple on the tennis court. Without warning, the lights suddenly come on. He appears, and right there, he snaps a tennis racket in half and drives it straight into the young man. The scene never tries to be realistic, quite the opposite. It fully embraces its dark sense of humor, turning a piece of sports equipment into a completely unexpected murder weapon. The stake. In House of Wax, a group of friends becomes trapped in a nearly abandoned town, completely unaware that its residents are hiding a horrifying secret. Little by little, they discover that the Sinclair brothers turn their victims into terrifying wax sculptures. Among those victims is Paige Edwards, played by Paris Hilton. After her boyfriend Blake is attacked, Paige desperately flees through the forest until she reaches an old sugar mill. The place looks like the perfect hiding spot, but Vincent Sinclair isn't far behind, and it doesn't take him long to find her. Paige climbs inside an old car to hide, and unlike many slasher victims, she refuses to give up without a fight. When Vincent gets close, she fights back and manages to hit him with a metal pipe, but she doesn't land it cleanly and she barely leaves a scratch. Still, for a few seconds it looks like she's finally earned herself a chance to escape, but that advantage doesn't last long. Vincent grabs the same metal pipe she used against him, and just as Paige has the brilliant idea of looking through the car window, he hurls the pipe with unbelievable accuracy, hitting Paige directly. The moment happens so suddenly, the audience barely has time to process what just happened. Alexa. In Us, the Wilson family discovers that every person has an identical, extremely violent double. While the family struggles to survive, the movie cuts over to their wealthy neighbors, the Tylers, showing that they're also about to come face to face with their own doppelgangers. It all begins when Kitty hears a strange noise outside and asks her husband, Josh, to see what's going on, but he doesn't even consider going outside. He simply glances through the living room's glass door, cracks a joke, and assures everyone there's nobody there. He's exactly the kind of character who thinks nothing bad could possibly happen. Until it does. Moments later, the family's twin daughters are ambushed by their own doubles and killed. Meanwhile, downstairs, everything finally falls apart. The doubles of Josh and Kitty break into the house and begin attacking them. Josh's double even extends his hand toward Kitty as though he's about to help her, only to pull it away a second later, revealing it was just another cruel joke. Kitty then tries the only thing that still seems reasonable. Injured and unable to escape, she asks the house's virtual assistant for help. Struggling to speak, she whispers,
Ophelia, call the police.
but Ophelia completely misunderstands and starts playing a song.
Sure, playing F the Police by NWA.
At the exact moment, Dahlia, Kitty's double, finishes attacking her. It's one of the funniest and most uncomfortable scenes in the entire movie. The double. In the back rooms, the story follows Clark, the owner of a furniture store who discovers an entrance into the mysterious back rooms. The place transforms his fears, his trauma, and his guilt into something physical. That's where Captain Clark appears, a grotesque creature inspired by the pirate mascot from his own furniture store, representing everything he spent his life refusing to confront. After kidnapping his therapist, Mary, and forcing her to relive an argument from his past, Clark finally hears the truth. She makes it clear that the end of his marriage and the destruction of his life weren't the world's fault, but the result of his own choices. For the first time, Clark seems willing to accept that, but not in the way he should. As he lets Mary go, he admits that he's a deeply flawed person, and that's the exact moment his monstrous counterpart appears. Instead of running away, Clark tries to talk to the creature as though he's finally accepting who he truly is. But the monster responds in a very different way. The creature lifts Clark off the ground and bites him, while Mary manages to escape. Almost everything that follows happens off-screen. The audience simply watches the therapist desperately fleeing, while the sounds of the attack echo throughout the back rooms. Moments later, the creature reappears carrying Clark's lifeless body, making it painfully clear what became of him. The spaghetti. In Final Destination 2, Evan Lewis seems to be one of the luckiest people alive. Thanks to Kimberly's premonition, he survives the massive highway pileup, and even celebrates his second chance at life after winning the lottery. But anyone familiar with the franchise knows, escaping death the first time never means you're actually safe. Back at his apartment, Evan starts making himself something to eat, and everything begins going wrong all at once. His ring falls into the kitchen sink's garbage disposal, and his hand gets stuck inside. As he tries to free himself, a frying pan left on the stove ends up starting a fire in the kitchen. The flames spread quickly, smoke fills the apartment, and it seems obvious that's how Evan is going to die. But Final Destination loves playing with the audience's expectations. After a huge struggle, Evan finally pulls his hand free from the disposal, escapes through the window, and climbs down the building's fire escape. One important detail: before doing that, he had thrown the spaghetti down onto the ground below. When he finally reaches the street, he lets out a sigh of relief. He survived the garbage disposal, the fire, and even a small explosion. It looks like death has lost once again. It only looks that way. The moment Evan takes his first step to walk away, he slips on the exact same spaghetti he threw out of the window himself. And that ridiculously stupid slip is what triggers the real accident. The fire escape breaks loose from above and comes crashing down toward him. It stops just inches away from his face. Evan stares at it, lets out another breath, and for half a second, the movie makes you believe he's actually survived, before the rest of the fire escape comes crashing down. In fact, we've already made a video showing how this and several other Final Destination deaths were created behind the scenes, and it's a really fun watch. Click on it now and check it out. I'll see you there.